Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and I am here today with Katie Kiefer. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for having me, Christine.
Thank you for being here. Is there something that you want to say about yourself or what you do before we jump into our conversation?
Just what I do, I read soul blueprints and I then use the theta healing technique in conjunction with reading the Akashic records, using the soul blueprint as a reference point to help clear out blocks and restrictions and help people move forward in what they want to create and who they want to be in their life, and especially in this flux of change we have. It's using that soul blueprint as a reference point, I'm finding, is really helpful.
Yeah, it would be, because we don't know what life is going to look like a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And so making changes, we want to make changes from something that's really deeply aligned versus trying to just react to what's happening on the surface.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so you had a really interesting place that we were going to start today about anchoring energies. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk some more.
Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard a lot of talk about anchoring in the energies, anchoring in the higher timeline. There's a few meditations I've seen about how to do that, and just various ways. And I don't see any of them as right or wrong. They just are. They're just different perspectives. For me, how I see anchoring in an energy is essentially the energies you embody, because the energies you embody are the energies that you are radiating all the time. They're what you're contributing to the planet herself. It's what you're contributing to society. And it's actually what drives your experiences in your own life. So those embodied energies, to me, is really, you can't anchor in the energy of joy if you're really fully in the energy of despair or fear.
Well, no, and that's really interesting right now for what's, for all of the things that are going on in our world right now. So we've got the coronavirus, we've got the economy that seems to be continuing to slide off the rails. And we have a lot of protests and a lot of this really great momentum for social change. And one of the things that you see on social media are people who think that they're talking about something, some new idea that they're aspiring to, with any of these kinds of things. But the energy that they bring to it is anger or hatred or fear or whatever it happens, despair, whatever it happens to be. So from your perspective with this, is the energy that they're anchoring would be the emotional energy of the anger or the despair, or would it be the idea that they're attaching that to?
In my perspective, what I see happening is people anchoring in. Well, there's two ways to look at it. They're either anchoring in that anger and that fear, because that's the energy that's being exuded, not the idea. The energy of the idea isn't really there yet.
Yeah.
Another way I look at this is that these are really deep-seated things within people that are simply being pushed out.
Yeah.
And so as they're being pushed out, there will be space for the higher, more loving, more gentle vibrations to take its place. But I also see a lot of people that are hanging on to those fear and anger energies. And I think it's really just because that's it's what they know.
Yeah.
They know how to operate and how to do something from there. They haven't really seen that they have other options yet.
Yeah, and anger is very cleansing and clarifying. Like anger in and of itself is it's a powerful but also neutral emotion, in that if you can use anger to make great transformation. It's a great catalyst to action. And so I'm seeing what heartens me about a lot of the protest movement now is I'm seeing the rise of anger, but not it being, I mean, it is in some places at some times, but not in it being directed as anger. Like it's anger as a catalyst. But what I'm
Hmm.
really enjoying about what I'm seeing is that it's the catalyst, and then there's the spaciousness for something else to be there. It's not anger for the sake of anger. And one of the things I tell people that are say things on social media, is that hatred of hatred is still hatred. Intolerance of intolerance is still intolerance. You're still
Right.
feeding the beast. And so you're feeding the beast of that emotion. And so if you're coming at something from one of the emotions, I'm not going to say anger, because anger can be catalyzing. It can also catalyze destructive stuff. So it can be used in all kinds of different ways. But if you feel like a victim, and your way of solving that problem is to victimize somebody else, like that doesn't help anything,
Mm-mm. No, it
because it's
doesn't.
just perpetuating the energy of victim. But if you feel like a victim and you become angry at that, and you're allowing yourself to move to that higher level, what would it be like and feel like if I wasn't a victim? If the things that make me feel like a victim actually shifted, and I was able to be something other, or feel like something other than a victim, and reaching for that. Like, and I see a lot more of that than I saw 5 years or 10 years ago with different kinds of protests, which were really, anger, expressing anger, and catalyzing anger in other people, and it just kind of being this anger fest. And now I'm really seeing, not among everybody, but among a lot of people, particularly young people, that the anger and all of the emotions beneath that, they're coming to the surface, so that they're able to envision something new and try it out, like these autonomous zones, which it's a it's a fascinating, experiment in self-governance, which they're going to get torn down, then they're going to recreate and get torn down and get recreate and stuff. And that
Hmm.
happened in Occupy Wall Street too. They had their own kind of mini societies that were going on to try out, what is it like to live in this different way, and to begin to practice some of these new energies coming in about, what does it mean to be in community with people, and to trust your community, and to prioritize the peace of living in community, and what that can mean. And so I'm seeing a lot of
Hmm.
hopefulness with this that I didn't see before. But I do think, your point is really important, that you want to be radiating more. Well, I shouldn't say you want to. I would like to see that we're radiating more of these higher level energies on the planet, than just perpetuating the same old, emotions, just wrapped up in different wrapping paper.
Yeah, I get that. It makes a lot of sense the way you put it, because I do see this as like this is a purge of lower energies
Hmm.
out of individuals and the collective. I think where we tend to run into some problem is the judgment factor.
Hmm. And the
And
fear factor,
so,
the
yeah,
survival
yeah,
impulses.
the,
Yeah.
the judgment and the fear factors. Because there's a lot of people, I think that, I mean, I'm one of them. I see what's going on. I feel what's going on. I'm
Hmm.
not hijacked by it, whereas 10 years ago, I'd have been completely hijacked by it.
Hmm.
But now it's like I can watch in this, wow, I see what's going on here, and really be able to step back into a different energy and hold that space of let it purge, let it come out. And but then I also see things on social media about, like, one of the biggest things that I see that seems to like really, it's like a zinger. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, the silence is violence. And it's that concept of, if we don't hear you, and this could be a complete misunderstanding based on individuals and because everybody's going to think differently.
Yeah.
But what I see in that is basically, if you aren't speaking up, then you're being violent to whatever the deal is. I don't quite agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're standing in the face of it right now, right here, and you have the opportunity to say that phrase, what you just said is inappropriate and it's unkind.
Mm-hmm.
Then yes, if you're silent, then yeah, you're kind of playing party to it. That said, I think there's also a bigger way, or not necessarily a bigger way, but another way to come at it. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is energetically, because
Yeah.
we're not energetically silent ever. I don't
Yeah.
think we're ever energetically silent. There's a lot of people who are also, it appears to look like they're being silent, but they're not, because they're doing that energy work. They are
Yeah.
really anchoring in, I see you, I love you. Right now, on the physical, practical plane, there's not a whole lot I can do, but energetically, I'm holding, they're anchoring in a different energy, which
Yeah.
makes
And
it
that is
available for
actually,
others.
yeah, that creates the new template. And
Yes.
because we are energetic beings, only 7% of our communication is verbal and 93% is nonverbal. And of that 93%, quite a bit of that is energetic. And so people like you and I and kind of our tribe who are looking at what's happening and looking at the energy beneath it, and how do we begin to shift the energetics that
Mm-hmm.
away from what has held this old order in place, and begin to create the energetic structure to allow this new order to rise in an organized kind of way versus a haphazard random way. So there's that whole energy structure that holds ideas together. And when you are doing the work of trying to create a new set of ideas to live from, a new set of energies that we can live from and create from, like, that's big work, but it's quiet. It's like background work. It's the
Right.
work of all the empaths in the
Mm-hmm.
world who recognize and understand how energy works, and have managed
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like how to navigate that themselves. Because if you can't manage your own energy, you just stay there, like work with that before you try to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But so one of the things that I'm trying to anchor in, that has come up recently, and it's kind of been a process, because I was really moving into this space of like, what would I, like, right now the world is organized around power and around money, and those are the two primary organizations. If you look at all of our systems, they all they all radiate out from those two values as core values. So I was looking at, like, what would it be like what would the core value that I would want to live from be, and how might that be in the world. And so, like, my core value was really about individual and mutual well-being. If that was our primary value, and if money served our well-being instead of it being the primary value, and if power served individual and collective well-being as a subservient value versus the dominant value, like, how would society be? And you can't, I realized that I couldn't envision what that might be, as much as I try here and there, because it's so different. Like, it's like the underlying premise and energy of a society would be totally different if well-being was the primary value. So I go back to, like, the body, and I look at, so what is power like in the body? And often power, the way that we have it in society, in the body, is that sympathetic nervous system, the stress system, the survival system, that whole sympathetic nervous system trying to assert itself, which is destructive to the body over the long term. It is helpful and constructive in appropriate amounts. We need that
Mm-hmm.
actually to live in appropriate amounts, but over asserted, it destroys the body. I mean, that's where chronic illness comes from,
Right.
it's like this chronic stress thing. So I went back to the body system, and what is well-being in the body? And well-being in the body is this place of the sympathetic nervous system. It's that where everything is in coherence and in harmony and working together for the general health and well-being of a body, where every cell, every organ, every system has its role, it has what it does, it has its individuality, it has its purpose, but it works together in a system, in its own expression, also for the well-being of the system. So that's like the well-being system. And then in a body, they're not have to be in conflict, but they are in kind of this dynamic state where, when we wake up in the morning, it's our stress system that gives us the energy to move up. So our stress system in a societal thing would be kind of the energy to make changes. And then as changes are being made, then the sympathetic nervous system, to extend this metaphor out, would be that place where, once that change is made, then we begin to harmonize that with the system. And the system begins to repair itself, to make changes and to come into a new level of homeostasis. And it's kind of that process back and forth. So when I was looking at life and what things might be from a place of well-being, I couldn't envision it, but I could feel it in my body, because that's that's my super sense, is to feel in the body the difference between living from power and living from well-being. And so one of the things that I'm trying to anchor in my life and in my energy is like well-being as a value, a structural value in society, and individual well-being, everybody's individual well-being, just like every cell in the body's individual well-being, and the well-being of the entire system, so the entire body, because a cell that is working for itself outside of the well-being of the body, we call that cancer. And that's just, that's not healthy for a body. It's this beautiful dynamic mix between the two, where they're not at odds, they're not in conflict, but they're working together for like the dynamic well-being of the system.
That's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, the vision that you have for that. One thing I think would be really important to do would be to not necessarily redefine, but absolutely have a different perspective on power. Because how we see power really is force over and force.
Yes.
It's very forceful. And typically in the world, the way we have it, it's power over others, power, it's forcefulness of this thing moving forward. But if we take it back into the personal power within, then it becomes instigating. If we use it in that larger instigating piece to say, well, and that's where your power really, that's the only power we actually have, is in that instigating piece of instigating change of and we can do that without forcefulness. They're very different. So if we can decouple forcefulness from power and let power become more focused on just that personal power over your own life.
Yeah, that autonomy.
Yeah, exactly. And that is truly having power within your own life and using it appropriately instead of imposing it on anyone else. When you raise your consciousness, you inherently receive more power over your own life. With that power over your own life comes greater responsibility. True responsibility for your choices. When you are truly raising in your consciousness and claiming that power just over your own life, you're also inherently claiming that responsibility of your own choices. And that, I think, is where it gets kind of wonky, because a lot of people will want that, and I've been there too. I get it. It's when you realize, oh, I'm responsible for that. Yeah, you are. And it's not always fun. But when you recognize that and claim that, and I think the more of us who do that, then we also understand that, one, we're not responsible for someone else's experience or their perception, provided we show up in the fullness of who we are and being clear and being kind and genuine. Those are our responsibilities. And then we're also not using that force.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And that is that transition of power within even the body
Mm-hmm.
system, where it's not,
Yeah.
if your sympathetic nervous system is trying to have power over, that's actually a misuse of a nervous system. That
Right.
surge in the nervous system is about, either surviving a moment or giving yourself the energy to be able to move through something, like using cortisol, using
Right.
adrenaline, that kind of stuff. And so it's part of the whole process
Mm-hmm.
versus something that continues to kind of prosecute power over, which is kind of where our
Right.
power is on the planet right now. But that, it's a really interesting thing, as energetic beings who are wanting to participate, but maybe, like, I know for me, I don't know for you, but I know for me, going to a protest march with all of the people and all of the energies, like, it's so overwhelming vibrationally to me that it would take me 2 weeks to recover from that. Even though I'm much better now with my energy than I was before, it's just so much, and it's not really how I operate in the world. And so for people who want to participate, but maybe that's not their level of participation, or they've got, kids and a job and they can't go out and do things, but they're vibrationally attuned to really pay attention to what am I broadcasting, what am I embodying, what am I bringing in, how do I want to be in the world, what do I want to contribute to what we are moving toward, and how do I do that in my own energy, in my own body, in my own life, and how do I live that to add that energy to what's coming next. And it's not about looking at what it's going to look like necessarily, because I don't think we know what things are going to look like, but it's that building of the structure of how do I shift my life from survival mode and stress mode to well-being mode, or whatever yours happens to be. How do I move from being hard on myself to having self-compassion? That's a huge thing. And if self-compassion becomes, an underlying energy that you're broadcasting and contributing to the world, like, just taking your energy away from being hard on yourself, which radiates out into the world, to being compassionate with yourself, helps to shift that for everybody. It changes the template that we're operating from.
I mean, yeah, when we are making that change
Mm-hmm.
from beating ourselves up into self-compassion, that shifts everything within us, which also then shifts how the world responds to us. It shifts how we show up in the world, and it shifts
Mm-hmm.
how we view the world. And to me, that is a way to start anchoring in a different energy. And some of these will take practice.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because we're really, especially if we've been conditioned to be highly self-critical, when we're highly self-critical, we tend to be highly critical of others. So
Mm-hmm.
when we become more gentle with ourselves, inherently we become more gentle with other people too. And so that actually puts those energies into the field and makes them more available for others.
And it
So
removes from the old system.
yes.
It takes those little drops out of that old system, so it does not have the same power it did before. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like withdrawing your support from the old paradigm and adding your support to this new way of being,
Yes.
self-compassion, love, all of these sorts of things, that helps to create that new template so we can build something from there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's huge work, and it's the complement to all the surface level work of the changing the laws of the protests, of pulling down signs, of the reimagining what an economy can be, because it's not going to come back the same way that we thought it would be. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
trying to recreate how it had been, how might we reimagine it? And so I would say, for people who are inclined to this kind of work, to look at kind of the things that prick you or trigger you and begin to dismantle those. Like,
Mm-hmm.
see where you're operating in that old paradigm. Like, look at your own energy first. Don't look at the world to see what's wrong that you want to fix. Look at what is out of balance within you.
Hmm.
and begin to move those things from a stress system, relating it to the body, or even to emotions, from stressful emotions and stress in the body to more of that parasympathetic well-being equanimity system, because that's how we thrive physically and emotionally and spiritually and in every other way. And how do you withdraw your energy from a system that's in disorder and begin to integrate your energy into a system of order, biologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, on
Hmm.
every level.
Yeah. Is, I have a little bit of a different take, and I see where
Mhm.
you're coming from, and it makes sense to me. I come at it, I come at it a little differently. I really do see it as what is
Mhm.
triggering you are you and your highest ability in any given moment. And your highest ability today might be higher than it was yesterday, and then the next day it could like bottom out.
Mhm.
And it just showing up to the best of your ability
Mhm.
energetically and within yourself every day is what matters.
What you bring to the situation, and that's something that I think is not talked about enough. It's what you bring to the situation, is not the action of it
Hmm.
in and of itself. To keep coming back to the structures of dismantling within me all those places that are operating in dysfunction and disharmony and stress and survival, and withdrawing all of my energy from those systems and bringing it into in thriving, my personal thriving, societal thriving, creating that container and the energy of thriving, so we can build what we build from more of that sense of everybody benefiting. And which is, to
Hmm.
me, part of that parasympathetic nervous system, or that whole new system where we really look at that way of thriving versus how do I get mine and survive, and
Right.
everybody's on their own, and nobody's ever on their own. Like, it's like this crazy thing with individualism. Like, did you were you born in the wilderness? Did you teach yourself like to hunt and fish by yourself? Did you teach yourself to walk? Like, none of us have done any of this alone.
Mm-mm.
Individuality is like a total fiction, and it's something that we value and we prioritize in that whole Darwinism, survival of the fittest, when actually most of nature and most of the body operates in cooperation
Hmm.
and mutual thriving. And
Yeah, it's a
so
symbiotic relationship.
it is. And so when we begin to look at how can we make a system that works, we look at what works. And if you look at what works in nature, if you look at what works in the body, it's all a template for how we can operate as a society if we begin to change what we bring to the scenario.
Oh, I just had this thought. Something that we're lacking, at least in the US, I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
sure how it goes elsewhere. We are lacking true communication. The lack of communication that we
Mm-hmm.
have, I think, amongst individuals as well as between the government and the people, there's like none. There's a lot of shouting and finger pointing going on, but there's not enough conversation.
Well, and because conversation and understanding and connection don't happen in survival. They don't happen
That's
in the
true.
stress system. The
That's
whole
true.
system is not designed to operate that way. It's
Hmm.
designed as like a slash and burn sort of system. And
That's
so
true.
it's still part of that other place. But that actually brings up a really good point, and then I think we can wrap this up. But that our way forward for those of us who really want to create a more thriving society is actually to begin, and we got to dismantle our own reactions, but to have conversations with people, and particularly people who are not the people that you would ordinarily talk to. I mean, talk to people
Hmm.
who have other ideas, talk to people from another political party, talk to people of another race, talk to people from another religion, talk to them
Hmm.
from another generation, because that's
Yeah.
another big divide we have, is the generation that's ruling things like in their 70s and 80s, and this younger population who are seeing the world in an entirely different way. So how do we have some of those conversations
Hmm.
so we are able to really get a larger sense of what the whole system is that we're living within, instead of just our ideas about how to survive in the system as we envision it, and and to begin to have conversations and use those conversations to help dismantle our own views that might be still stuck in survival. Because
Yeah.
that's one of the things I found to be really helpful is when I find things that challenge my assumptions, both hidden assumptions and like my deeply held convictions, which I'm trying to dismantle. It's really good to question your own models of the world. It's really good to question your own
Mm-hmm.
ideas of what's right and wrong, of what justice and injustice is. It's really good to look, more deeply into things than what you see on the news, because you get to dismantle your own defenses. Because when we're
Right.
in defense, we're in survival. And we can't, as a
Yeah.
society or as individuals, move from survival into whatever thriving happens to be for us individually and collectively, until we're able to take down our own walls and be in a greater sense of mutual connection, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And that's a beautiful way to put it. And, you said something a little bit ago that like really clicked and really ties back into anchoring in the energies, is what are you bringing? What are you bringing to that? Because anybody who's been on this path for a while of true self-awareness and digging out even more deeper and deeper and deeper, who they really are, what they really want, and fine-tuning and honing those things, I would venture to say that those who have been on this path for a while will understand that what you think you're bringing to it might not actually be the energy that's active.
Yeah.
People who are newly awakening and new to this path, that's information that if you don't get it now, you will eventually.
Yeah. One way or the
Eventually,
other.
somehow it will happen. The energy you're bringing to it. So the energies that you're anchoring in are the energies you show up with.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we can get underneath it and unpack our own inner world, our own inner energies, what are we actually embodying? And so yeah, you can paper over pretty easily. You can show up at a protest and stand there in love and appearing to be in love when really you're in fear and anger. What of those energies is actually stronger? Because that's the one that's being anchored in. And so if it means to you that you don't show up to an event like that so that you can hold your center of that love and light and envision the changes that you want to see, so that you can anchor in more of that love, to me, that's the more important job, because that's that's bringing the energy in.
Yeah, because we have to bring in the energy along with the idea. Because
Yes.
an idea is only a pie in the sky concept until we have the energetic structure to support that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you're coming with an idea of bringing justice to injustice, which is, great. But if you're coming at it from this place that I want to victimize those people I feel have victimized me,
It's still
as a form of
victimization.
justice, it's still victimization, and that's the energy that you're bringing, and that's the
Yeah.
work for those of us who are doing the work on this side, that because if you can dismantle these things in yourself and be really clear about the energy that you're embodying to come forward, that's a huge service. It's a little different looking, but it's a huge service, and it's one that anybody can do if you begin to become more self-reflective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something I think that we need more of, is more people to actually be truly self-reflective.
Yeah.
And so really anchoring in that the energies of what you want and paying attention to that and feeding that is, I think that's far more effective in the long term than showing up for a weekend of protests.
Yeah, if that's not your calling. So some people
Yeah,
are great for that. Like they bring the full energy to the
right,
process that process needs, and that's perfect for them. And there's other people that do this the other way. And
right.
it really becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a lifestyle of
Hmm.
what am I showing up to? What am I bringing to the moment? What am I creating with my energy right this moment? It's a great skill to bring to your own life, but it's also a great skill to bring to, what we are creating as a species and as a country and as a society and as a state and as a community,
Hmm.
and all of that. And as a generation too, because
Yeah,
every generation has different ideas and different
that's
energies.
right.
All right, Katie. So tell people how they can reach you, and then let's wrap up.
The easiest way to reach me is either on Facebook through my Awaken the Inner Light page, or it's Coffee with the Angels books. Either one of those, or on my website, awakentheinnerlight.com or coffeewiththeangels.com. And you can drop me a message using the pop-up there.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will be talking again soon. And this was a really interesting conversation.
Indeed. Thank you for having me. It's always fun.
It is. This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.